Not least, but definitely last. That is Revere Kinkel, who is a professor here at UCSD, talking about iConquerMS, a new, it's not a new partner. We were partners in phase 1 already, and but the name changed, I believe, from the PPRN, from a previous acronym, perhaps. And once we're done with the questions and everything, please don't leave, because I promised Rita I would do 2 announcements. So please.
Thanks, Lucille. So I'm filling in for my my colleagues. The iConquerMS PPRN is actually run through the Accelerated Cure Project, which is located in the Boston, Massachusetts area, where I used to be. I was one of the founding members of this nonprofit. It was initially a repository for patient data and biological samples for researchers all over the world. And we've reconfigured it over the past 4 years, including the development of this PPRN, to help us kind of extend our observations from the original repository. Let's see, how do you move this thing? Is this one? This one. There we go. Just by way of a little background about MS. MS is a relatively rare disease. It's typically a disease of white, upper middle class educated individuals, but there are significant numbers of individuals that seem to be coming out of the woodwork every year from more underrepresented populations. We actually have very little idea as to how many MS patients there are in this country, which is one of the goals of this PPRN. The last time anybody looked to do any kind of an epidemiological study of the prevalence of the disease and the location of patients throughout the country was in 1975. And the original drugs that were approved for MS dating back to 1993 were approved under orphan drug laws, because it was presumed that there were under 250,000 people with the disease in the country. And now people estimate that there's anywhere from as few as 400,000 upwards of 700,000 individuals, depending upon how you define the disease, which is another big question. The diagnosis is really difficult and often inaccurate, and I would say about a quarter of the patients that come in to see me in clinic carrying a diagnosis of MS actually don't have MS. And it's for complicated reasons, but it's mostly because it's a clinical diagnosis like many of the diagnoses that we make. Unlike Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, we don't have a biopsy that we can make. We have these imprecise clinical subtypes, and we have no idea how they relate to the disease pathogenesis and how the disease injures the nervous system or creates problems over time. It has a huge cost. With all the therapies that are available, these costs have gone up because most of the therapies cost in excess of $50,000 a year. Right now we have 12 disease-modifying therapies with 8 different mechanisms of action. It's really a favorite of pharmaceutical companies because they can put a huge price tag on these drugs. And up until at least recently, it's been possible for physicians around the country to place anybody with a presumed diagnosis of MS on one of these drugs, because essentially everybody that comes into your clinic has been told that they have a relapsing form of the disease, whether they do or not. So we have a large number of people on these drugs risking side effects and problems and certainly excess costs for questionable benefits. In terms of the outcomes that we look at in MS patients in both clinical trials, they don't really match with what the patients are interested in finding out. This is just a survey from 2013, but you can look back to the 1980s and you get similar results. Patients are really interested in drugs that help them maintain their employability or going to school if they're younger, their active lifestyles, their relationships. The therapies that we've approved for MS over time have been exclusively focused on whether or not they decrease relapses of the condition. And relapses, in effect, are a rare phenomenon. They're something that in most recent clinical trials occur at a rate of about 0.4 a year in placebo-treated patients. And in their age dependence, so as patients get older, they actually get fewer in number. So when you take a therapy and a patient who's, say, 50 years old, and you're talking to them about starting a therapy to decrease relapse rates, one of the problems is that at that age group, we can expect possibly as few as 0.1 relapse per year, or 1 in 10 years. And it's hard to really justify a therapy for that purpose. Now, there's been this thought that the therapies would have an effect on MRI measures of activity and the progression of the disease, but it's been something that's been very difficult to actually prove in practice. So iConquerMS has been established in a sense to find out what it is patients want to know, and patients have been telling us, and also to collect these outcomes, which are mostly self-reported outcomes regarding their disease. It is definitely an initiative by and for people with MS. We have people represented on all levels of the committees that are involved in the study and are constantly sending in ideas. They were involved in the development even of the questionnaires that are used to track the patients over time. It's funded by PCORI, and the participation is through this iConquerMS portal, which patients connect with. Our goal is 20,000 patients representative of MS in the United States. We've finished stage 1, and we got stage 2 funding. The first stage, we started recruiting in February of this year, and our goal was to get 2,600 patients registered. And we have 2,600 patients not only registered, but having used the website more than once. So we're making good headway. The people involved are the Accelerated Cure Project, the informatics group at Arizona State University, and Feinstein Healthcare, which has been instrumental in helping us reach some agreements and get the word out about this study. It's been very difficult to recruit for these studies. With so many organizations and registries involved in the care of MS, there's these competing interests which have created some interesting dilemmas that we've had to navigate through over time. And as of now, we've been able to reach agreements with most of the societies that represent MS patients, and all of them are trying to assist us in getting patients to the site. Again, iConquerMS, like many of the PPRNs, is hoping to connect patients through this patient power network and the clinical data research networks. And one of our goals in stage 1 was actually to get about 1% of patients contributing electronic health record data, and we didn't quite even meet that goal, which was a very meager goal. And it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have going forward. These are the groups that are collaborating right now. This includes well-known groups such as the MS Association of America and the National MS Society, the MS Foundation, Can Do MS, MS Coalition, and the Personalized Medicine Coalition. All of them are trying to get the word out and help patients register with the site. When patients go onto the site, this is what they're greeted with. It's a very simple way to enroll. They have a video that tells them about the study and how they can participate. They have a simple consent that they would fill out. They enter their information, and they complete a profile about their MS. And then the main patient-reported outcomes that are being collected over time are the NeuroQual data set that was developed over the past few years as a standardized patient-reported outcome data set. There's a way to request your electronic health records, but again, that's been a challenge. And it's been a challenge for those who have even been able to obtain their electronic health records, even to get them uploaded into the site. The patients have available dashboards which show them how they're doing related to other patients in the site and their own status over time. And the patients are invited to invite friends and cohorts. And like many patients with these chronic diseases, especially relatively orphan diseases, they have very large networks they participate in. blog groups, social networks, there's support groups. This is primarily how the word is being spread for the site. So what we find is that when we have a patient that we convince in clinic to participate, they go to the support group, they get others involved, and before you know it, you got 10 people from the support group involved. The real question is whether or not we're getting the underrepresented populations involved, and it's a real challenge as mentioned previously. We're trying to do that by getting these individuals to register actually in the clinics. The governing board consists of, well, there's a governing board, there's a research committee, a communications committee, and a membership committee, all of whom have a significant number of patients involved. We're really trying to engage individuals throughout the process of donating samples, disseminating the results, talking about the study, getting other people involved, sending in ideas regarding areas of interest to them and information they would like to have about MS, participating in studies. We have individuals applying to the research committee for various online studies, and most of them have been approved, just pending their own funding to go ahead with the studies. And so the whole idea here is to kind of gain this broad spectrum of information that we don't have available on MS. And going forward, we have a couple of initiatives underway. One of the main concerns with MS, as I kind of hinted at earlier, was the lack of any kind of comparative effectiveness research or any long-term research on the effectiveness of any of the therapies that we have available. So we've submitted a large study to PCORI for a pragmatic clinical effectiveness trial, which is going to be tagged on to an ongoing study we have called Opt-Up. And it's an interesting design. We're going to be using the iConquerMS group as a virtual study cohort that we're going to recruit both from iConquerMS as well as from insurers when patients get approved to start a disease-modifying therapy for MS. And then we're going to have, we have another network. It's the Accelerated Cure Project Clinical Research Network, which is currently 10 academic clinical MS centers around the country, which we're going to expand to 20, and those will be the real study populations. We're trying to better understand the relationship between the clinical outcome measures that we typically measure in patients and the patient-reported measures that we'll be collecting in both the patient population as well as in the iConquerMS population over time. The iConquerMS cohort really gives us an extensive amount of power for doing these kind of studies so that we can hopefully recruit 8,000 individuals for this particular study using both the real study cohort as well as the virtual study cohort. That compares to typical MS clinical trials, in which an enormous MS clinical trial would probably have less than 1,000 patients randomized to either treatment or placebo. We're also doing, we're hoping to do a study with the mood PPRN on depression in MS. They put a letter of intent in for that. To try to improve our recruitment, we're doing some, we just started this actually, some hyper-targeted Facebook ads through an agreement with Social Lab. Again, we've only been able to come up with so far 2,600 registered patients since February of 2015 with a goal of 20,000. So to reach that goal, we're going to have to find ways to increase that recruitment rate. I think I'll stop there. Any questions?
Accelerated Cures was the name I was.
Yeah, that's the nonprofit organization that is the main kind of sponsor for the for iConquerMS. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question. Right here.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I'm so always fascinated by the part of your talk that discussed how MS has been physician-driven largely, and that some of the putting people on medications has been unclear as to whether it's necessary or not. How do you see your PPRN helping disentangle some of these issues when patients need medications, when they don't?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of pieces to that. One of the problems that we have is we have a large number of patients that go on therapy, maybe for right reasons, maybe for wrong reasons. But for unknown reasons, they just continue on that therapy, and nobody's willing to take them off. There's this like concern that when they discontinue a medication, that there's going to be some deleterious outcome, which has never actually been shown. There are kind of this mythology that's developed that certain individuals, certain doctors will say that I had a couple patients that I took off of this therapy, usually when they've been well into a progressive phase of the disease, and that they suddenly deteriorated. Of course, there's all sorts of reasons for that to occur. So one of the things that we can do is, first of all, track individuals and what's happening to them as they come off of the therapies. In many other physicians' experience, what happens when they come off therapy is when they have fewer side effects, especially from some therapies like interferons, they actually, their self-report measures actually improve. They'll come in and tell their doctors 6 months later that they never felt better. So it's going to be a kind of a mixed story. I think that we also need to have a better idea of how individuals do off of therapy. There's been such a push to get everybody on therapy that being a MS patient who's not on treatment, you're almost treated by your doctor like you're a smoker when you come in. It's like, you're not on therapy. Well, what's going on here? You know everybody's supposed to be on therapy. And it's amazing. So there's this, they're like a pariah, or a medical pariah, I guess. So I think the PPRN can help us understand a little better who those patients are and how they're doing over time. And lastly, I think we can just collect more useful information on what actually happens to patients on therapy. In the study that we're planning to do, the comparative effectiveness study, we're going to be looking primarily at quality-adjusted life years on therapy over time as a more kind of useful measure of how well that therapy is doing, as opposed to looking at these discrete and independent measures of like side effects, more like what the oncologists have done for years, and not enough people in the neurological fields have done. And this kind of a network, both the virtual as well as the real network, will allow us to be able to do that.